She walked into the billionaire estate with confidence and grace, but left with more power than anyone ever imagined. What they did to her in public was meant to shame her, till she turned the tables in a way they never saw coming. This is one story you won't forget. Subscribe to Simply Stories for more true power plays like this. She stepped out of the black town car with poise, her heels clicking softly on the gravel driveway of the estate that spanned acres of old money and quiet arrogance. The estate belonged to one of the most powerful white billionaire families in the country, owners of a multi-generational conglomerate that touched everything from finance to pharmaceuticals. This wasn't her first time walking into power. But something about this invitation felt more like a formality than a celebration. They were about to finalize an $800 million partnership with her company. Yet instead of meeting in a boardroom, she was invited for a casual weekend retreat. No agenda, no structure, just smiles, wine, and the illusion of welcome. But she knew better. This wasn't hospitality. This was a test dressed up as charm. The butler who opened the door didn't smile. He nodded stiffly, took her small overnight bag, and gestured silently for her to follow. Inside, the atmosphere was museum-like, marble floors, gold-framed portraits, and silence that swallowed her footsteps. She was introduced to the family at once, standing in a drawing room that smelled of old leather and fresh lilies. The matriarch extended her hand with a faint smile, her eyes scanning the CEO's tailored suit and pearl earrings. The patriarch offered a curt nod, never quite meeting her gaze. The younger members of the family gave her tight smiles, their curiosity poorly disguised as politeness. They welcomed her, yes, but not as an equal. More like a curiosity they weren't quite sure belonged in their world. She was escorted to her guest room, a plain space at the far end of a long hallway, the smallest room on the property. The window faced a stone wall. There was no fruit basket, no personalized note, no sign that she was a distinguished guest whose signature would soon anchor an $800 million deal. Meanwhile, the other invited CEOs, 3 white men from other firms, were shown to suites with sweeping views of the lake. Fireplaces, private balconies, and servants bringing cocktails on silver trays. She noticed this with a quiet smile. These details weren't missed. They were stored. Dinner was held in the main hall beneath a chandelier the size of a small car. Crystal glasses clinked, and laughter rolled easily across the table except where she sat. She had been placed 2 seats away from the patriarch, far enough to signal hierarchy, but close enough to observe. During the meal, the others were asked about their visions, their recent acquisitions, their growth strategies. When they turned to her, the questions took a different tone. "You've certainly come a long way. What do you think was your big break?" one asked, as if her career were an accident. Another leaned in with a chuckle. "Must be refreshing to be a woman in the room for once." She smiled politely, answering with poise and precision, correcting them without ever raising her voice. They complimented her company's bold marketing and her unique leadership style, as if her approach were a novelty rather than a strategy. She could feel the air shift whenever she spoke, how they nodded just a little too slowly, how they traded glances when she used industry terms with fluency. They were weighing her not by intellect, but by appearance, background, and presence. And she let them, because she wasn't there to impress them. She was there to watch. After dinner, there was brandy in the lounge. She declined. As she walked alone back to her guest room, she passed by the open doors of the other sweet echoes of laughter, the glow of fireplaces, the clink of more drinks. She entered her own room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened her laptop. She typed notes, not about the weekend's agenda, but about the people in the room, their behavior, their assumptions, their weaknesses. Every patronizing smile, every calculated slight. She documented everything with clinical clarity. This wasn't just a weekend retreat. This was a chessboard. And she'd already moved her first piece. The next morning, she was up before dawn, while the others were still in silk robes or requesting room service. She had walked the estate grounds alone, mapping the landscape. When breakfast was served, she noticed the help staff seemed more respectful than the hosts themselves. A maid quietly told her she admired her strength, then disappeared. Before more could be said, that single whisper held more sincerity than anything she'd heard from the family. During the day, group activities were planned: boating, tennis, garden walks. She participated gracefully but was never truly included. Conversations would start. Before she arrived and end as she approached, she was handed tennis rackets, but never picked as a partner. During the garden walk, one of the family members casually referred to her as a self-made woman, the emphasis dripping with sarcasm. Another said, "You must have had incredible mentors to reach this level." She nodded, replying, "Yes, the kind who challenged my mind, not my identity." I'd shut the conversation down quickly. Still, she never raised her voice, never. Lost her smile. Her silence was her armor, her eyes, her weapons. She wasn't shaken. She was watching. Every question, every gesture, every room placement was another layer in their carefully constructed hierarchy. But they didn't realize something vital. Shay had no interest in climbing their ladder. She'd already built her own tower, and from it, she could see far more than they imagined. That evening, as she prepared for the main dinner banquet, she stood before the mirror. Her dress was simple, elegant black silk that hugged her frame with quiet power. No diamonds, no flash, just presence, a storm in still water. She walked into the room like she owned the estate, even as the hosts treated her like an afterthought. She noticed how their smiles grew tighter as guests from outside the family began to gravitate toward her. Other CEOs, investors, even the younger crowd, curious, impressed, intrigued. They didn't know her story, but they could feel her command. As the night wore on, she remained poised while they revealed more of themselves through laughter, arrogance, and small talk dripping with bias. By the end of the night, she had heard enough, seen enough, and understood everything she needed to know. The deal they thought she was chasing, it was already in her hands. But whether she signed it, that depended on whether they deserved to sit at her table. And right now, they were failing the test they didn't even know they were taking. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the estate, where manicured lawns stretched endlessly and white tents shimmered with the promise of wealth and reputation. Day of the family's annual charity gala event designed to impress investors, charm socialites, and bathe the hosts in public praise. Photographers were already scattered around the grounds, snapping early arrivals in designer gowns and tailored suits. Crystal champagne flutes clinked as servers glided between guests, and string quartets played softly near the reflecting pool. She arrived with calm precision, dressed in a minimalist ivory gown that skimmed the floor as she walked, a deliberate contrast to the sequins and feathers that screamed for attention around her. She didn't need to announce herself. Her presence did it for her as she moved through the crowd. The contrast between how she was received and how others were welcomed became glaringly obvious. Most smiled at her, but with tight lips, eyes flicking briefly before shifting away. Conversations paused when she passed. She caught phrases not meant for her ears, mockery about her urban roots, patronizing surprise that someone like her had made it into this world of dynasties and dividends. A couple of investors greeted her, only to follow their handshake with questions that reeked of disbelief. "So you're the CEO?" "That's unexpected. Impressive." The compliment was coded in condescension. Some of the family members introduced her two guests with vague, minimizing phrases like she's part of the diversity initiative or she runs one of our smaller partners. They didn't say her title. They didn't mention the $800 million deal she was supposed to finalize with them. They didn't speak of her company's global reach or its revolutionary platform that was quietly overtaking their market. To them, acknowledging her full identity would be too close to placing her on equal ground. And they weren't ready to do that, not here, not in front of cameras. But she noticed everything. Every whisper, every dismissal, every grin that said you're lucky to be here. And still, she smiled.
Yes.
She moved through the gala like a ghost in plain sight, seen yet overlooked. One guest approached her with genuine curiosity, asking about her company's latest project. She began to explain until a family member swooped in, cutting her off with a laugh, dragging the guest away with a hand on the shoulder. It was subtle, calculated, intentional. Her voice was being erased. In real time, the lunch banquet was the centerpiece of the day, set beneath a grand white canopy dripping with flowers and chandeliers. Long tables stretched across the lawn, name cards carefully arranged. As she approached, she noticed the seats closest to. The head table reserved for power players, industry leaders, and inner circle members were already filled. Her name card wasn't there. Instead, it was placed at the far edge of the tent, near the catering entrance, directly in the path of staff moving dishes in and out. She said nothing. She took her seat, gracefully adjusting her dress, fully aware that she had been placed where no cameras could catch her, where no connections could be easily made. Moments later, as she reached for her water, a young server, clearly nervous, stumbled beside her and tipped a full glass of red wine straight onto her lap. The cold shock soaked into the fabric instantly. The server gasped, apologizing profusely, frozen in panic. But no one else moved.
Oh.
Not a single member of the family stepped forward. No one handed her a napkin. No one offered assistance. Instead, from across the table, the matriarch chuckled and leaned toward her group. "This is why some people just don't belong at formal affairs," she said, voice loud enough to carry. There was laughter, soft, cruel, and echoing. Cameras flashed in the distance. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others pretended not to notice. And she sat there, hands calm in her lap, expression unreadable. Her eyes met the matriarch's for a moment, not with shame or anger, but with the controlled gaze of someone who had just seen the final confirmation she needed. They had underestimated her in the worst way. Not because she was unqualified, but because they believed her silence meant submission. She rose slowly, excused herself with poise, and walked out of the tent with the same dignity she had walked in. Not rushed, not shaken, just done. In the hallway leading to the estate's interior, she retrieved her phone, her fingers steady. One call to her legal team, her voice cool and direct. "Let's put the agreement on hold," she said. "Need to revisit the terms. Possibly all of them." The assistant on the other end didn't ask questions. She knew what that tone meant. Meanwhile, back at the tent, her absence went unnoticed by most. The family assumed she was embarrassed, licking her wounds in silence. They still believed she was lucky to be there. They still believed she needed them, but they hadn't been paying attention. They hadn't noticed the power behind her silence, the strategy in her restraint. They had mistaken her tolerance for weakness, not realizing she'd been calculating. Every moment, every word, every humiliation. She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked away drenched in wine, but drenched even deeper in leverage. What they thought was their show had just become her stage, and they were about to learn what it truly meant to try and diminish someone who had already built an empire without them. She closed the car door behind her, soft click of the luxury SUV, shutting out the murmurs, the laughter, the camera. Flashes, everything that had tried to diminish her inside that tent. As the driver pulled away from the estate, she sat upright, unbothered by the crimson stain on her ivory dress. It wasn't humiliation. It was a mark of revelation. She didn't need their approval. She never had. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her phone, and dialed her legal team with the same calm precision that had carried her through every boardroom she'd ever conquered. "Terminate all movement on the agreement," she said flatly. Immediately, no further communications, no explanations. "We're done." There was a pause on the line. Her lead counsel started to ask a question, but she cut it off. "Redirect your energy. I'll be opening a new round of talks this time with people who know what partnership actually means." Then she ended the call and stared out the tinted window as the estate shrank behind her like an irrelevant monument. She wasn't angry. She was activated. The next call wasn't to salvage anything. It was to reshape everything. She dialed a competing firm, one that had courted her company discreetly over the past few months, but had been edged out when the billionaire family stepped in with their pomp and legacy. "I hope you're still interested," she said coolly, "because I just reopened the table." The executive on the other end practically stammered with excitement. Meetings were arranged. Non-disclosure agreements triggered. Just like that. The tide began to shift. In the hours that followed, her fingers moved swiftly, navigating through contacts with surgical strategy. These weren't revenge calls. These were power moves. She didn't need to punish the family, they had done that to themselves. What she needed was alignment with leaders who valued innovation over bloodlines, transparency over tradition, and respect over rituals. She reached out to private investors, smaller firms with hungry ambition, and even a few international players who had long admired her platform but never had the chance to sit at the table. Now they did. She was offering them the very opportunity that the billionaire family had believed was theirs by birthright. By evening, industry insiders were already whispering something was off. The $800 million partnership everyone had anticipated was suddenly silent. The media caught wind, sensing tension. And while the family said nothing publicly, they had already begun calling her team privately, trying to piece together what went wrong. But she didn't respond. Instead, she released a short, elegant press statement that landed like a thunderclap across the industry. In every venture, it read, "There comes a moment to choose between legacy and integrity. We have chosen to invest in long-term partnerships, rooted in respect, collaboration, and shared values, not vanity." No names were mentioned, no direct accusations made. But everyone knew exactly who the statement was about. The impact was immediate. Investors, who had previously lined up behind the billionaire, family began pulling back, quietly, strategically. No one wanted to be associated with a brand that suddenly seemed outdated, arrogant, and tone-deaf. Analysts noticed minor dips in their stock, nothing catastrophic, but enough to raise eyebrows, enough to make board members ask hard questions, enough to bring discomfort to a family unused to ever being questioned. Internally, the family scrambled. Meetings were called. PR teams briefed. They attempted to reach her multiple times, mails, phone calls, even a hand-delivered letter to her corporate office offering a sincere apology and a request to meet privately. She declined. No words could rewrite what had been clearly written in action. They had invited her into their world to measure her and failed to realize she was the one holding the scale. Within days, industry blogs and financial outlets began speculating. Headlines like "CEO walks from billionaire deals, signals cultural shift in corporate power," and *old money, new mistakes. How a billionaire family misread the room, flooded the conversation. She gave no interviews. She didn't need. 2. The market was already speaking on her behalf. At her company headquarters, the mood was electric. Her executive team stood behind her, not just because they respected her decision, but because they understood what it meant. She had chosen dignity over dollars and still walked away with more power than she arrived with. The new talks she had initiated were moving faster than expected. Competing firms didn't just want the deal, they wanted the association. They wanted to be aligned with the woman who had just made the industry look twice at everything it thought it knew. The family, meanwhile, was forced into a position they weren't used to. Defense. Their name still carried weight, but now it came with a whisper asterisk. They mishandled her. They thought they were untouchable. Her slipping asterisk, and in a world driven by image and confidence, those whispers were enough to shake even the sturdiest foundations. She didn't rejoice. She didn't throw shade or call names. She simply moved on. With grace, with precision. With doors opening before her not because of pity, but because of proof. She had demonstrated something far more valuable than wealth. She had shown what real power looked like when it refused to beg for a seat at the table and build a new one instead. And as the estate faded in her rearview mirror, replaced by city skylines and boardrooms buzzing with opportunity, she knew the truth. They hadn't just lost a deal. They had lost the future. The following morning, headlines were still buzzing with speculation, and analysts scrambled to decipher the silence behind the canceled deal. It was already 3 steps ahead. In a private conference room atop a sleek tower overlooking the city, she met with the executive board of a rival conglomerate. This was a company the billionaire family had publicly dismissed in the past, considered second tier. Too disruptive, too new school, too be worthy of elite partnership. But now, That very company was sitting across from her with a matched offer of $800 million plus sweeter terms, more equity, and a marketing campaign that would position her not just as a partner, but as a visionary. The contract was signed. In less than 48 hours, it wasn't desperation, it was destiny. The rival conglomerate knew the opportunity when they saw it, and they refused to repeat the arrogance of their competitors, where the billionaire family had expected her. To assimilate into tradition, this new alliance amplified her originality. The campaign went live within days. Full-page spreads in business journals, digital takeovers, televised ads celebrating a new kind of leadership. Her face, her company, her name, standing tall in bold font beside the words, integrity, innovation, power. The media couldn't get enough. Stories erupted across every major outlet. CEO walks out on billionaires, closes better deal within 48 hours. She chose herself and the industry followed. Diversity and power isn't just optics, it's the future. Talk shows debated her boldness. Financial analysts broke down how her decision shifted market sentiment. Influencers, CEOs, and celebrities reposted clips of her poised presence at the charity gala, juxtaposed with the quiet fallout that followed. She hadn't said a word to the press yet, but she didn't need to. Her actions had spoken loud enough. Meanwhile, the billionaire family scrambled behind closed doors, desperately trying to control the narrative. They released vague press statements citing miscommunication, logistical confusion, and unfortunate optics. Some family members appeared on morning shows, smiling awkwardly as they brushed off the event as a misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion. But it was too late. The footage had already circulated. The wine spill, the laughter, the isolation, the cold expressions. And her calm exit, head held high, leaving a table they had made unwelcoming. Apologies fell flat. Investors didn't buy the spin. The family's boardrooms grew tense as minor stock tremors turned into credibility gaps. Partners began to ask questions. Their aura of untouchability had been pierced not by scandal, but by silence. By one woman's quiet refusal to tolerate disrespect. By her unwavering choice to walk away. When she finally agreed to a televised interview, the anticipation was global. Dressed in a sharply tailored black suit with pearl accents, she sat across from a seasoned journalist known for tough questions. But there was no need to dodge. She was composed, measured, deliberate. "I believe respect isn't earned through wealth," she said softly. "It's demonstrated through action." Partnerships require more than just shared interests. They require mutual regard. When that's absent, the numbers don't matter. She never named the family. She never pointed fingers. But the weight of her words landed like thunder. Her voice, calm and articulate, spoke not only for herself but for every person who had ever been underestimated, patronized, or dismissed despite their excellence. The interview went viral within minutes. Sound bites flooded social media. Think pieces appeared within the hour. She became more than a business leader. She became a symbol of dignity, of quiet strength, of knowing your worth and never begging someone to recognize it. The billionaire family's empire didn't crumble. They had too many layers, too much wealth, but the hit to their reputation was severe. Where once their name had inspired instant deference, it now carried a shadow. Guests spoke in hushed tones about the incident at the estate. Influential allies began distancing themselves subtly. The next time they held a gala, attendance was lower. Flashbulbs were fewer. Something had shifted. Meanwhile, she flourished. The new partnership sparked innovation across industries. Her company's valuation soared, boosted by the public's trust in her leadership. Young entrepreneurs cited her as an icon. Universities invited her to speak. Articles labeled her the woman who redefined the deal. She didn't chase fame, but it found her anyway. And through it all, she never gloated. She didn't need to. Her power didn't come from revenge, came from knowing who she was, and never compromising it for a seat at the wrong table. In choosing herself, she had chosen something far greater than profit. She had chosen legacy. They had tried to make her feel small in a room they thought they owned. But when she walked out, she didn't just take the deal with her. She took the narrative. She took the future. And she reminded everyone watching that real power isn't given. It's claimed silently, boldly, and on your own terms.